This story is called The Interloper. Perhaps in retrospect, Doug and I were both remiss in not keeping a closer eye on Mother. But we both have our careers, and she's always been in excellent health. It's not easy to keep up with family, what with having a job that demands 80 hours a week. Often all I want to do is crash when I get home. Besides, it's not that we ignored her. I Skype with her every weekend, and I think Doug does something similar. I pay for her to come to Calgary for Christmas, and Doug and Erica visit her in Toronto every summer. But it was a huge shock when I got a call from a young woman that I didn't know. She said that Mother had fallen down the steps outside her apartment and was in Scarborough General Hospital. She had a compound fracture in her leg that had required surgery, so she had to stay in hospital overnight. What a shock. Mom's only 52, hardly an old lady. I told my senior partner that I needed some family time. Got back to Toronto yesterday morning after taking the red eye from Calgary. I took a cab from the airport and let myself into Mom's apartment. By that time, she'd been sent home and was already there. As soon as I let myself in, a woman of about 40 introduced herself to me as Beth. I was pleased to see that there was already a caregiver with Mom, and I was very impressed that the hospital had been able to get CCAC to get someone in place so quickly. I wasn't surprised that Mom, who was very chatty, would have talked a mile a minute to the hospital staff, the CCAC people, and anyone else who would listen. Even so, I was surprised that Beth knew my name and who I was. She immediately asked whether I'd had a good flight from Calgary, and how pleased she was that I got to Toronto so quickly. But I didn't think all that much of it at the time. While I asked Mum how she was feeling and whether she needed painkillers and so on, Beth made lunch for the three of us. That struck me as well beyond the call of duty from someone from CCAC. I wondered how many hours they'd been able to arrange for Mum's care. We certainly didn't have that level of caregiver hours in Alberta. We all ate lunch together and Beth said that she'd leave us to it. I'll see you again tomorrow. She kissed Mum on the cheek, which seemed a little familiar for a caregiver. She said goodbye and let herself out. And once we were alone, I commented to Mum on how much care she seemed to be getting, how pleased I was that CCAC had been able to get someone in place to help her so quickly. She certainly seemed to be a most attentive and caring person, I said. No, replied Mum, Beth isn't from CCAC. I need to do a whole lot of explaining. I hardly know where to begin. She stopped to gather her thoughts, and there was a moment of silence that stretched out. Then once she continued, the words came tumbling out. Beth is my daughter. You and she are half-sisters. If anyone had been watching, I'm sure they would see my mouth open speechlessly. Talk about a bombshell. Mum went on, I should have told you and Doug years ago, but somehow I could never find the right time. And anyway, back then it didn't seem to matter so much. It was all in the past. You never knew, but I had a child when I was very young, long before I met your father. I was still in school, and anyway, I couldn't get an abortion. Being Catholic, it was a mortal sin. It was like a Victorian melodrama. Once I began to show, they sent me away to stay with Mom's cousin Rita, so that no one in town would know I was pregnant. Of course, they guessed. Everyone knew what the real story was when a teenage girl went away to stay with relatives for 4 or 5 months. So when I came home afterwards, everyone was careful to avoid me asking where I'd been, or how I was feeling, or what I'd been doing. I sort of avoided everyone because I knew that they knew, and I was ashamed and embarrassed. When the baby was born, it was a little girl. I knew I'd be forced to give her up for adoption. I never even held her. The nuns said that they didn't want me to bond with her. I cried and cried when they took her away, but no one in the hospital seemed to care. Her cousin Rita did her best to comfort me. When I got home, Dad and Mom weren't all that sympathetic. I knew they were ashamed of me. They wanted to avoid me staining the family reputation, so they never said anything. Like I said, it didn't seem to matter back when you were young that I never talked about what had happened. Why would I want to burden you with something like that? Eventually it just became a long time ago, just something shameful in the past. So if I didn't say anything about it, it would be something that had never happened as far as anyone else was concerned. That's why I never told your father, and I never told you and Doug. It was my secret and I had to live with it. The adoption papers were sealed. I never knew where my little girl had gone, or even what her name was. So why bring it up? Nobody knew it anyway. I was ashamed. But then a few years ago, you probably remember that the Ontario government passed a law to say that adoption records could be opened. Well, I was on my own. You and Doug had your careers and you could only get to see me a couple of times a year. No, don't get me wrong. Don't stop me. I'm not blaming either of you. I'm really proud of what you've both done in your careers so far. Who would have thought that I'd have a son working for the Royal Bank in their London office in England, or a lawyer for a daughter in Calgary? I truly think that both of you are awesome. But like I said, I was so lonely, being divorced and everything. So I got to thinking about whether I could find out what had happened to my little girl. I didn't know whether she would even want to see me, or to know about me, given that I'd given her up the day she was born. She probably thought I didn't care about her. For all those years, I'd never forgotten her. I wondered where she was. Did she have nice adopted parents? Was she pretty? Had she got married? All those things. But I could never say anything, because neither your father nor the twin of you ever knew that she existed. I found out that I might be able to use the library to trace someone who was adopted. The Ministry of Community and Social Services had a website, and the librarian got me started. I found out that my baby was called Mary Beth. Her adoptive parents were William and Madeline Jenkinson. They lived in Hamilton at the time of the adoption. But even so, there was no guarantee I could make contact with my baby. She might have gotten married and changed her name, or her adoptive parents might have moved far away or died or become untraceable. I was lucky they're still alive, they still live in Hamilton, and I found their address. I had to file what's a notice of contact preference to say how I would like to be contacted. I assume that Beth, that's what she liked to be called, wanted to find me. I left an email address and my phone number with the Jenkinsons. After a couple of weeks, I got an email from Beth and we met. Beth's a dental hygienist. She took the day off to look after me today. Now I've told you this much, I guess I must tell you the rest before I chicken out. Why did I wait so long to reach out to Beth, since the law about adoption records was changed back in 2008? The answer is that I had to wait until Uncle Lyle died. It was he who had raped me. He was Beth's father. I wasn't even 14 when it happened. Uncle Lyle and Aunt Marjorie used to come up every summer and stay with us in Huntsville for their vacation. One night, Mum and Dad and Aunt Marjorie went into town to see a movie. Uncle Lyle didn't want to go. While they were out, he got me to have a drink with him. Of course, it went straight to my head, and then he raped me. It was horrible. But let's leave it at that. I was too ashamed to tell anyone what had happened. When it got obvious I was pregnant, Dad didn't believe me when I told him it was Uncle Lyle had done it. So the official version was that I'd gone out with some unnamed boy who'd done that to me, because to have accused Uncle Lyle I would have brought shame on the family. And Dad said that we couldn't risk it, that Uncle Lyle might have to go to jail. You can probably imagine the rest now. After what happened, I was always afraid of sex. I hated it. The tragedy is that I truly loved your father. I still do. If only we could have been like brother and sister, my life would have been perfect. But your father liked sex. He loved me and he liked having sex with me. I kept making excuses as to why I didn't want to. Then after Doug was born, I said I didn't want sex anymore. We should sleep in separate bedrooms. Poor Maurice. He felt so rejected. He really did love me too, you know. It was me that drove him away. He stuck it out with me till he was 10, but eventually he said that he wanted a divorce. The day he told me was the saddest day of my life, worse even than when Uncle Lyle did what he did to me. But even then I couldn't tell him why. I just had to let him go. He was always so decent to me. He never argued about how much I should get in the settlement. I got the house and alimony as well, and shared custody of you 2 children. It was really tough for him living alone. I'm genuinely happy that he found Janice. I even hope they had great sex together. She fell silent. I was the one who cried first. Then the tears fell fast and furious. I held her and she held me. And when the sobbing finally subsided, Mom wiped her eyes on a tissue, almost the last in the box, and turned to me. Please don't think I'm going to stop loving you and Doug because Beth has come into my life. It's not like that. It's hard to explain. There really is room in my heart for the 3 of you. And I'm certainly not going to make you all pretend to be happy families. What does Beth know? I asked. She knows that she was given up at birth, of course. I haven't told her about Uncle Lyle, and I hope that you won't either. It would hurt her a lot, I'm sure, if she knew how she was fathered. I've just left the question of her father sort of blank, because that's how it is on the birth certificate. I don't want to tell Doug about that part either, because he was always fond of Lyle. You might remember it was Lyle who taught him how to fish up at your grandparents' place. And they still used to go up to Huntsville for May 2 for him, Labor Day, but I made sure never to let him alone with you. But that hasn't answered your question. You really wanted to know what Beth knows about you. She knows who you and Doug are, what you do for a living, and that I'm very proud of you. She knows your father and I got divorced, but the how and why of that is none of her business. It was all long after she was born and long before I met her. But you're probably really asking how much I love her. What can I say? It's completely different from the love I have for you and with Doug. I didn't bring her up. I didn't change her diapers or bandage her scraped knees or walk her to the first day of school, all those things I did with you two. Beth loves her adopted parents. They're called Bill and Maddie, and she loves them. I met them one time, and I don't want to come between Beth and them. I just want to be able to keep in touch with her. I was so happy when I was the one in the hospital, and you and Doug were so far away, I felt I could call her to visit me. And when she offered to come and help me out when I got home, I just dissolved in tears. It was so wonderful. Last night in Mom's spare room, I couldn't get to sleep. Simply too much to get my head around all of a sudden. A half-sister, Mom's terrible secret that she kept all those years. Then I couldn't help having a load of unworthy thoughts. It was Beth that Mom had called from the hospital, not me. Logically, I knew it made sense. Beth lives in Scarborough, I live in Calgary. But even so, I can't help feeling jealous. I wasn't the one she called. I just got an anonymous young woman from the hospital. And just how close are Mum and Beth? It was just so wonderful that Beth was prepared to come and sit with Mum that she just burst into tears. Never been that wonderful when I see her. Beth isn't the only one who's had to take time off work, you know. And how long have they known each other? It's obviously been going on a long time. She's even got together with Beth's other family. Mum said she met them the one time, but then she called them Bill and Maddie, not William and Madeline. Maybe they spend all kinds of time together. After all, she's pretty good at keeping secrets. Maybe this was supposed to be another secret she would have kept to herself if she hadn't had an accident. Maybe Dad and I would have found out about it when she died and we read her will. For heaven's sake, Mum and I talk on the phone every week. She had plenty of chances to tell me about Beth, but she never did before yesterday afternoon. But she's apparently blabbed all about us to Beth. What she said about that this afternoon about never finding the right time to tell me made logical sense, sort of. But I keep getting confronted by the little green-eyed monster of jealousy. And as for that bit about having room in her heart for the three of us and not wanting to pretend to play happy families, looking back it seemed a bit rehearsed. Maybe that's exactly what she is expecting us all to do. I'm not saying I don't like Beth. She seems nice enough, but Mum can hardly expect me to be all buddy-buddy with someone I just met for the first time and was told, hey, I'd like you to meet your new sister. But the way it's happened doesn't exactly put our relationship off to a good start. I keep wondering, what did I do wrong? My job's important. As a junior lawyer, I always knew I'd have to work super hard and super long hours. As Mum says, I made more of myself than just being a housewife. That means making sacrifices elsewhere. I've never married. I come home every night to an empty apartment and just crash. I've done my best. It's always me that initiates the Skype calls with Mum every week. Maybe she's too busy with Beth to want to call me instead. I don't know what more I could have done to keep in touch. Besides, when she gets this idea in her head about wanting to meet the baby she had to give up, I wouldn't have been able to stop her. Not that I wanted to try to. Who would have ever thought it about Uncle Lyle? He seems a harmless old geezer. Of course, he was a lot younger when he did that to Mom. Imagine she was only 13. Gross. What kind of pervert does that to a 13-year-old? And did Auntie Marjorie ever know, I wonder? They say, whoever they are, that the wife often pretends that nothing's wrong so as to protect the marriage. I look like a wreck this morning. Hardly the Calgary corporate lawyer in the business suit. I'd better put on some makeup before I go downstairs. I wonder how Doug's going to take all this. He's coming tomorrow. It'll be interesting when he had his own little tete-a-tete with Mom.